everybody, it's Steve Napier. Welcome to the Circle of Brilliance. Today we're going to continue our discussion on managing emotions. You should be looking at our little list, and we've worked our way now all the way down to the last two, pride and shame. And those two we have a tendency to talk about together. And so we'll be talking a little bit about pride-based leadership and shame-based leadership, and where pride lives on the change grid, where shame lives. We'll even talk about pride shifting and shame shifting. So how do we go about moving people around on the change grid just by using these the energies of pride and shame? And why is that sometimes good, and why is that sometimes not so good? So we got lots of little things to be exploring around this subject. So with that, we might as well jump right in with the question, where does pride live on the change grid? So,
well, in power, in particular along the heart line.
In power, particularly along the heart line. And so right along here. And so we could say right there, is pride to be found in the upgrid danger zone?
No.
Nope. Downgrid danger zone?
No.
Nope. Ingrid?
I was going to ask you, T, if someone who is that far ingrid experiences any pride, even if they're in the power, response state.
I would say, again, if we're looking at the horizontal plane of the change grid, where we're looking at intensities, the ingrid danger zone is of such low intensity that any pride that they might be feeling is superficial and fleeing at best, and they might even feel guilty for feeling it. So could it be there? Yes. But is it a mid-grid person or an outgrid person's energy associated with pride? No. So be very, very, very quiet, very whatever. No. And so is there pride outgrid?
Well, I would.
Yeah. All right. And so
I might change the word.
Oh, do change the word. So they might say they're proud, but arrogance.
Arrogant. That's a good word.
Yeah, arrogance. And so and I would also suggest to you that there is a kind of an element of pride that someone feels downgrid, but it might also be the pride of arrogance. So how is that different? So what's outgrid arrogance versus downgrid arrogance?
Level of activity.
Okay, tell us about that.
Well, downgrid, there's going to be no activity. They could have that feeling and kind of just rest in it and do nothing with it. But the outgrid person is intent on making something happen.
Yep. So they're actively engaged in whatever it is that's going on. Well, in fact, they're in execution, so they're like killing it. And so they might very much feel that pride in the moment based on the activity. So that feels like it's tied to some sort of meeting between an external opportunity and an internal kind of feeling going into it. So that's that. But downgrid, this person may feel very proud, but to David's point, they're not very active. So how is that different? This to me is the domain, again, very high level of ability, very low level of perceived challenge. This is the domain of mastery. Mastery can lead it to that know-it-all sort of mindset. You think the know-it-all person says they're proud or thinks they've got reason to be proud? Or
I would call it smugness.
Smugness. There's a good word. Yeah.
That is good.
That. That's a great one. That's a great one. So they may very well feel proud, but you wonder how they would support that. If someone took them to the test for that, they're relying upon whatever ability they've already accumulated, where the person who's outgrid, and again, I keep squiggling around the danger zone. I'm talking about a healthier kind of outgrid. behavior, not the arrogant sort of thing. But these people are kind of going like, oh no, I'm in this moment. I am doing whatever it is that needs to be done. So yeah, good job me. So good job everybody else. Good job, we're doing it. We're doing it. So that to me is a much more alive and active kind of pride than this, pride of yesteryear, pride of history, resting on one's laurels, that kind of pride from days gone by sort of a thing.
Is
Yeah.
that really pride in and of itself? I find like a lot of people down there, I think it's an illusion of pride. Like they're not dealing with the issue at hand. An example of it, we've been interviewing a lot of entrepreneurs. I wonder if Boris was on the call, he probably can speak to this, but these tech entrepreneurs, they killed it, right? They started business, make millions of dollars.
Yep.
But they're miserable. Like their lives are absolutely miserable. And it seems to me, just based on the interviews, like they're afraid of something. And so the businesses, in other words, become this portal for escapism.
Mm-hmm.
And then more they pour themselves into those things, the comfortable they become and are in who they are. But like one says, he has such low social skills. He's afraid. He's a multimillionaire. He's afraid to ask a woman out. So he built this like isolation castle around himself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that what you're describing would be an activity list that's got a lot of things all over it, and we're kind of talking about them like they're all one. Right. To your point, though, about is this person really experiencing pride? Remember, we're talking about perceptions, how people perceive themselves. This person in the downgrid danger zone, I would not be surprised at all to find out that they perceive themselves as having a lot to be proud of. But I think the big distinguishing factor is, are they proud in the moment, like the person in the healthy part of the driven driver would be feeling, or is this the pride of something that is, historical, something from days gone by, when they were in their heyday? So this entrepreneur that you're talking about, I'd need to kind of know a little bit more about where they are. Are they still actively building the business, or is it?
They sold it, but he's looking to do something else. So I said, well, he's talking, because, people that come into this clinical program suffer from a lot of anxiety and stress and these kinds of things that ultimately impact their body in some kind of way, because that's an inflammation state when we're talking about anxiety and stress.
Sure.
So,
Brian, what's going on with your microphone? You're sounding a bit metallic.
I was thinking the same thing, like he's underwater every once in a while.
Yeah, because usually you sound really clear, but something's yeah. So I don't know. Anyway, we can hear you and understand you, but it's a different sound quality than you normally have. I think a way of looking at what I'm getting to, the difference, is that how many of you have ever known people that are in their 60s or 70s that are still referred to by a label that they earned much earlier in life? So the people who might have been very active in the military, who were a captain or whatever, and to this day they still get called captain, or you just kind of go like, wait a second, I mean, good for you for what you did, thank you, blah blah blah, but that was then, this is now. And so these might also be the people who feel more entitled to whatever's going on, like they're owed a certain level of respect because of something that happened long ago. So Kathy, what was your word? Did you say puffery? What was your
No, I said smugness.
Smugness. Yeah. I think we got that going on. Let's see, Chris, did you have something you want to throw in? Oh no, I didn't know who just muted. Okay. All right. Yeah, I just saw you moved to the top of the list for some reason. There it is. Okay. So anyway, I guess I just wanted to say that there are places on the ChangeGrid where people will perceive themselves as experiencing pride, but the kind of pride they're experiencing is very different than the kind of pride we talk about in someone who is in power, along the heart line, in power, slightly outgrid. This is living pride, living your pride, being in pride, as opposed to memories of pride. I do not think there's any pride that we're going to encounter very far upgrid. In fact, the opposite is probably true. And I also think we're not going to find much pride experienced or perceived ingrid. Okay, so do we all resonate with that? Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the opposite of pride is shame. Where do you think shame lives on the ChangeGrid?
Ingrid.
On the ingrid side of things?
Yeah.
And tell us about the shame of ingrid, an ingrid person might be.
Well, how I see it is it's a lessening of oneself. It's it's shame about who you are. It's different than guilt. Guilt is over something you've done. Shame is about who you are.
Yeah.
And the ingrid piece of it, it's so far, it's somewhere along the line between the PowerPoint and ingrid, where there is a sense of shame about who am I? How do I show myself to the world? I'm not good enough. And so it's more and more about hiding oneself, I think. And that's what takes it could potentially take it to the furthest, left point, that point on the ChangeGrid of just wanting to disappear eventually.
Right. Well, in fact, let's look at it energetically. If I am at coordinates 0, 0, I'm kind of like an amiable. Now, as I start to move a little bit further out grid, I'm hearing a really strange echo. Linda, is that you? You just mute your line if you're not saying.
Okay, I will. I don't think so, but I'll mute it.
No, I don't know either. Might have been. Oh, it doesn't really matter. It's whatever. So as I start to move out grid, things change a little bit. So like right here, coordinates 1 and 1, I am definitely an amiable. So all three energies are amiable. Then I move to here. Now I am a driven amiable. Here I'm a balanced amiable. Now I am an amiable, driven amiable. But I can continue to try to give you all these exact labels, which I'm talking about right here. This is a driven amiable. And then we work out here more and more. So I bring that up just to say that a certain level of driver energy is required in order for someone to find value, I think, in themselves and in what they're doing. As that driver energy becomes increasingly subordinated, that whole sense of self, that whole sense of the value you might bring to whatever is going to be diminished. And maybe someone is squashing it down. Maybe you're just squashing it down yourself. And at a certain point in time, that all that amiable energy leads to self-sacrifice, because everyone else's comfort, everyone else's needs are paramount, and you become less and less and less significant, less and less and less valuable. And so sooner or later, there's not a whole lot of pride there left for you as the individual. So Kathy, is that kind of what you were getting to?
Yes, absolutely. It's that move toward, total amiability, totally self-sacrifice, to the point of potentially disappearing. I mean, that's each of those danger zones could lead to suicide in some way. And
absolutely.
that's so that's where that goes, I think, from that motivation for it. Yeah.
Well, and the survival technique on the very far ingrid side of things is to fade, to disappear into the wallpaper, just to be there, but no one really notices you there. You're all totally behind the scenes. Now, as you move further and further outgrid, the driver energy becomes increasingly profound. And at a certain point, if you're out here as an amiable driven driver, that's about as much driver energy as a person can handle without it becoming problematic. And so as we move further out grid, now we're a driven driver. Our focus on others has now vanished altogether. And as a result, instead of being prone to self-sacrifice, this is a person who finds it easy to sacrifice others. So yeah, throw someone to the wolves, throw you under the bus, wherever it is you need to be put. They're more than happy to put you there. So now they may still experience that kind of a certain kind of pride, but as David pointed out, that's arrogance. That's a real issue. That's where, we talk about pride as actually being one of the 7 deadly sins. Well, it's not pride as far as self-esteem goes. It's pride that's about puffing oneself up to be bigger and grander and more important than you really are. So where's the sweet spot then for real pride on the ChangeGrid? And I would suggest that it's kind of a little bit of an ellipse. I would want to encompass even some of the area to the ingrid side of the PowerPoint, because now at least I can feel some pride. I'm a driven, amiable driver. Wait, no. I'm a driven, amiable. And so I'm doing something. I'm out there trying to make something happen, gentle though it may be compared to driven driver energy. Nevertheless, I'm trying to push this agenda on behalf of other people. So there could very much be a place of satisfaction that comes along with being there. And then you get to the exact center of the ChangeGrid. And as long as you stay on the flat plane of that, instead of hover above the ChangeGrid, dissociate yourself, you can feel very good about who you are and what you're doing and all that. And that could actually be boosted more and more and more, because as you move further out grid, now you're actively formulating and acting upon your intentions. You're engaged in what's going on. You're doing what needs to be done. So there's a tremendous amount of pride that is available to you outgrid as well. So whatever that shape would be, that's what I think kind of encompasses pride as we're really are talking about it at today. Do you guys agree with that? Disagree with that? David, what do you think?
Sorry, T, I was distracted for a couple of minutes.
No reason. I just saw you unmuted, so I thought I'd
No, I like that explanation. I mean, I like going in grid and encompassing the PowerPoint, because I think it describes a different form of pride, as you're moving through it. So I appreciated that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like if I'm at that driven amiable, I think it's the pride of actually caring for other people, or actually doing something that impacts our society, our world, or whatever. And that starts here. Maybe to ultimately do the work, they got to get even bolder. But nevertheless, it begins with that energy that I'm doing something about it.
So if you wanted to build that, is that the place to start?
I think that's the place where a mission is born. So, and now I'm talking about something that's, a mission, not like achieving a business kind of a goal, but a mission as far as having impact on humanity. I think it's probably born there. And as the person starts to get more involved, more proactive, more engaged, they're moving further and further and further out. Keep in mind that I said it's born because awareness, this band here for engagement rings, that's where awareness is actually starting. There's a little bit of awareness that's happening here as well, but this is the place on the ChangeGrid where the person says, I might just be little old me, but I can't keep ignoring that X is happening. I can't keep being quiet about this. I need to step up. I need to step out. I need to do whatever. So I kind of think that energy is born right there. You guys agree, disagree? Thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think so.
Now, as they turn it into more of a, you know, what do we say, a campaign, you know, when it really starts to get mobilized. And now it isn't just one person trying to do something at the grassroots level, but now it's becoming regional, statewide, national. They're getting more coverage. You know, they're kind of building their I don't want to say power base, but their circle of influence, the range of impact they can have, that's definitely happening further out grid.
So is it like a spiral dynamics of some sort where you're moving out, but you come back in and then move out, come back in? Because there,
Yep.
as you start to move from that center, there's some things that you can't account for, like theory is
Right.
different than the application. So when you get into the actual experience, you're saying, you know, it's the what do you call aha?
Yep. Well, let's talk about spiral dynamic traveling just around the square that immediately encompasses the PowerPoint. So it starts, I mean, obviously it's continuous, but we'll say, all right, let's start here. Someone has this awareness that something needs to be done. And as they start to do something about that awareness, no doubt there's going to be some sort of puzzle, some pushback, some whatever that they're going to encounter that now creates a slightly upgrid kind of a situation. And hopefully they don't get pushed down. Hopefully they go, well, then I'm going to just step out and going to do something about it. And now they're over here slightly outgrid. And then that stabilizes and now they move slightly downgrid. Well, if that spiral just stays really tight around that PowerPoint, this can all happen rather quickly. And I think that's one of the things they're saying is that movement up the spiral is accelerating. Well, it can only accelerate because the spiral is getting tighter. On the other hand, in the old days, you know, the spiral might have taken you all the way around on this red circle or outside of the red circle. Well, now maybe we're able to make these adjustments far faster. Maybe it's because of technology, you know, social media, whatever it is. Maybe we're allowed to have much more of an impact much more quickly than we once were. And again, that person may say, hey, I can push it further. I can push it further. I can turn this into whatever it is they want to turn it into. Usually that's the outgrid energy, seeing opportunity beyond the mission. So we can work our mission and make money, or I can work on this mission and become famous. So whatever it is that the outgrid energy is coveting in terms of an outcome, that may be beyond the simple mission as it was identified and acted upon at the beginning. If that kind of makes sense. I'll give you one example of this. We lived in North Carolina for quite a while. And we had friends who were very active on the world stage as far as doing economic growth opportunities for small and impoverished nations, so microloans, that sort of a thing. And they opened up a little shop. And inside of this little shop, you could buy the wares that these small communities were actually producing all around the world. And but so it was very small. Don't think it was much more than a little bit of a display case. But nevertheless, this was it. They wanted to be able to sell these things so they could send those monies back. Well, before too long, you started to find out that there were actually organizations that were creating real storefronts scattered all across the country that were marketing and selling all of these wares that were produced by all these, you know, micro loans or these small communities, et cetera, all around the world. And so suddenly now, are they really trying to be of service? Is that really their big mission? Or are they going to like, oh, well, we're still of service, but this is also a profit-making business enterprise. You guys with me on that? Yeah. So there's quite a thing. Even up in Alaska, I don't know if anyone on the call has any Alaskan connections. We have a lot of people in Sun City West that their whole life was spent in Alaska. But if you've not been to Alaska, when you go there, you're going to find out that there is a very specific and unique fiber that is used to create clothing items. And that fiber is called kiviot. And kiviot is the undercoat of muskox. And so it's not like the muskox isn't shaved, but it's combed. So this under fiber gets kind of released. So it's super lightweight. And they use it to knit scarves and hats and all sorts of things that they in turn serve to whoever, sell to whoever. Kiviot items are extremely expensive. So we're talking about, you want a little bit of a hat, you're looking at $100 or more for a little knit hat. And some of their things can be up to and into the thousands of dollars. Well, as it turns out, Kiviot can only be harvested and turned into yarn and then made by a specific village of the indigenous population. So nobody else can do it. You can't have access to it. It's like they own it. They own it completely. And so you would think, well, that's going to create a very small market then, isn't it? Nope, because someone came along and said to that group of people, we'll buy every item you can manufacture. And so suddenly it's become this big, big enterprise. Well, what you've just now witnessed is something that was trying to be done at the grassroots level to help a specific population in a particular area to have better lives. And someone further outgrid said, oh no, I can support this, but when does supporting it become exploiting it? You know? And so you watch these things kind of happen as you move further and further outgrid. All right, particularly if the person's in the outgrid danger zone. But, you know, make no mistake about it, the driven driver energy is not only looking for opportunity, but actively pursuing whatever opportunities they stumble across and feeling really good about it. And I don't say that's undeservedly so. They're doing a good thing as long as they continue to honor what the mission originally was. They don't exploit, they don't whatever, all is good, all is good. Okay, questions, comments about what I've just described?
No, I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you.
So that's where pride all lives. Now, the nice thing about healthy pride versus shame is that healthy pride is always examining itself. So think about that, write that down, digest that a little bit. Healthy pride is always examining itself because it understands, I think, that at a certain point, pride is the fuel that powers the human enterprise. So it is a big motivator. It is something that keeps you on task, on mission, on purpose, on whatever it happens to be, because there's this constant feedback. When you've done a good job, your brain, if you will, Brian, I'll ask you about the neurotransmitter in a second, but you know you did good. And so your brain now rewards you with some kind of neurochemical, what do I say, a neurochemical reward, feedback that makes you feel a particular way that stimulates you to do it again tomorrow. Now, that's starting to feel like dopamine. So Brian, what else could be going on that isn't quite as addictive as dopamine experiences may be? Is that where GABA might also come into play, or GABA is about learning?
Acetylcholine is about the learning. In fact, it'll put the spotlight on whatever it is that you're doing. But when you feel something strongly and you connect with it, the dopamine prediction error reward says that you can essentially produce the same amount of dopamine as if that activity actually happened. So what tends to happen, the brain mediates and it'll signal corticotropin, which is a hormone that produces adrenaline. So it'll give you the energy, that kick, that spark. And like I say, the acetylcholine put the spotlight on it, and then just the anticipation of it in and of itself will keep you alert enough and in the game, so to speak, that you'll want to go through with it. And you can even rest on that.
Okay, because this has been my question, because we've always said that pride is the fuel that powers the human enterprise. So when someone has done good, they experience an internal, I don't know what word to describe it, an internal
Experience.
Experience, okay. Experience that just kind of lets them know you did good. No one needs to tell you you did good. You know you did good. And you feel it and all that. So the moment I talk about feeling something after our discussions about neurotransmitters, my head goes, well, I'm not feeling it in terms of my body's physical sensors, right? I'm feeling some kind of chemical response.
Right, because the thing about the when you talk about dopamine, the corticotropin, where it's produced, you're talking about the ventral striatum of the brain. So this is where the parts of the region are associated with more sensory interpretation, visual processing. So this is why, like, even for athletes with career-ending injuries,
Okay, you just disappeared. You went off on a very far distant trip. Come back.
The visual processing, visualization in and of itself is something that's happening internally, right? It's not
Right.
actual experience, but the brain has no way of filtering or delineating the difference between the two.
Ah, okay. All right. And so now review with us again what GABA does, because we did identify that GABA has a lot of occurrence or a lot of impacts energetically outgrid. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, what is the bowl of neurochemical soup that equals pride?
I would say that definitely acetylcholine, the
Okay.
GABA is relaxing. So when you're prideful about something, that healthy pride, and the key word, I guess, is healthy pride.
Yeah.
And that key that you talked about, it always checks itself, right? So there's a centering involved. That's GABA.
Okay.
And you bring it in because the things like serotonin, GABA, those things will pull you inward.
Okay.
To examine oneself. Acetylcholine puts the spotlight on what you're doing. It's connected with something that you feel real strongly about. Because remember, when we talk about neuroplasticity, it needs alertness, it needs focus, and it needs intensity. That's what builds even in rest. So you need.
So Brian, does that mean that you have to overcome the GABA to go further outgrid?
Right, GABA will keep you centered so that you don't go too far. You know how someone can, they're in an activity and then they can just go to the extreme.
Yeah.
And like basically go against their own boundaries, so to speak.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
GABA will keep you centered so that doesn't happen.
All right, because otherwise, so GABA regulates the impact dopamine might have, the drive dopamine is creating.
The adrenaline, it impacts all of that. It'll help regulate those so that you don't overstimulate. You're getting just
okay. All right. So then if we look at these, we would say then that this sweet spot we were identifying for pride occurs when there is a reasonable amount of noradrenaline, norepinephrine, that's got to be stimulated. In addition to that, there is, I'll just do this, there is starting to be some dopamine coming into play, but there's still plenty of serotonin in play. So maybe it's a balance of serotonin and dopamine.
Yes.
Now you put in
inward facing more so than outward facing.
And then we have the GABA that comes along also kind of in between as the mediator.
Right.
Okay, so that to me, that sounds really useful. That sounds like, all right, now I know what pride is, as opposed to downgrid, where we had kind of like, I didn't want to call it an illusion of pride, but a memory of pride, historically experienced or something like that, the recollection of pride, as opposed to something real. Now, you also mentioned some adrenaline could be coming into play. And adrenaline, what is this? Oh, this was the acetylcholine. Right. So there it is. It's at its height. And then we also looked at the endorphins, and they tend to be slightly upgrid. So the expressive driver is more having some endorphin sort of an experience.
Right. So the adrenaline is always present, because you have to remember, like if you're watching something and you get excited about it, you see the pupils dilate. That's the adrenaline kicking in, right? So it creates the hormones, or is secreted from the hormones that supports arousal, any kind of
Right.
arousal. So you can, you go through different levels of intensity when it comes to being aroused by something that you're either seeing or you anticipate. So that's where it starts to kick in the neurotransmitter soup, if you will.
Okay, good. All right. Yeah, I think that's really important, because if we're going to say that pride has a certain neurochemical soup, then is shame its own neurochemical soup, or is shame the absence of the pride soup? If that makes any sense. Because if I said, all right, well, downgrid, we find some types of shame. Ingrid, we find some, etc. What's going on there? Well, if I look at our little charts here, there's no adrenaline. There's diminishing levels of noradrenaline. There may be some dopamine. There's smaller amounts of serotonin. There's not all that much GABA. For some reason, we also said it could be downgrid. We're not finding very much in terms of acetylcholine. There's no histamine. There's very little endorphin. Yeah. So that's what I guess I'm wondering. So I know I'm babbling, but does shame have its own unique set of neurotransmitters, or could shame be experienced in the presence of many combinations of neurotransmitters other than the combination we associate with pride?
I would say the latter, because the neurotransmitters are always active in some way. So, there's something that keeps a person in shame. And so it's just the opposite of, or may not be necessarily be the exact opposite of that neurochemical soup in terms of pride. But there's a lot of different things that will keep a person there, depending on how they're experiencing what they're experiencing.
Okay. All right. Well, I wanted to go through all that because I have something I wanted to throw out to you guys to see what you're thinking about this. We need to talk about shame. And I know I'm scrolling through here, but the 4 different types of shame that we will encounter. And so there's upgrid shame, outgrid shame, downgrid shame, and ingrid shame. How are they different? Why might I feel shame when I am upgrid?
Well, it's an intense state, and it's an intense emotion.
Right. And so up here, you're feeling anger and grief and fear. But what is the languaging of the shame that's going on in your head when you're up there? Why would I be experiencing shame?
I think the shame would come from feeling out of control, and not being able to manage and get in control. You're talking, I'm looking upgrade. You're talking about upgrade.
Yeah, upgrade, but I'm pointing out down here, low perceived level of ability. So being poorly equipped, poorly prepared to handle whatever that situation is. And so how often might we hear people say, how did I let myself get into this situation? How did this happen? And feeling like they are to blame for whatever that situation may be. So can we kind of go like, yeah, that's possible. I can imagine a few of those situations.
Sure.
So my shame might be because as I evaluate my own role in my predicament, I find myself to be very responsible for where I am. And so there could be shame associated with that. So I'm in this horrible situation and I put myself there.
Is that buyer's remorse will be up there, or is that more?
Buyer's remorse could certainly be up there. There's also relationship remorse. There's, any number of things where you just kind of go like, oh, why did I let myself end up in this situation? How did I get to that I knew I couldn't handle? Why did I, so I think we can hear a lot of that languaging going on in situations that we might find upgrid. Okay, fair enough, easy enough.
Fair enough, easy enough.
Okay, how about downgrid? The downgrid person, now we've got the opposite situation, very low perceived ability, very high, very low perceived challenge, very high, highly perceived ability. Why might I feel shame? And how is that differently experienced and expressed in upgrid?
Well, that point on the grid, it to me says doesn't care.
Okay.
And doesn't care can be something that you could be ashamed for.
Or feel
right
underutilized. That's what happens down here. Mastery is a wonderful thing to pursue, but anticlimactic to experience.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I see the shame there as from not utilizing what you have.
Feeling underutilized, living in the past, living in the history, resting on the old laurels. And that's why I'm saying, like, as much as they want to profess their pride around what's going on, you wonder if that profession of pride belies kind of an undertone of shame.
So wouldn't the expression down there be similar to upgrid in terms of I should have known that, right? I'm a master of it. I should have known that. I should not have.
I think the difference is that the person upgrid will say that outwardly. Other people can hear them say that. The person is sore downgrid, that dialogue is happening in their own little head. You know, because they don't want to let the whole world. In fact, think about what happens down there. This is depression, profound depression. So we know that people that are depressed about whatever's going on may very well benefit from some sort of chemical intervention, but they need to talk. They need to explore things and on, which means they have to feel comfortable enough to openly disclose what these feelings are all about. Remember we talked about people in apathy are trapped in a velvet prison? You know, that apathy is the unavoidable side effect of mastery. Well, live that and tell me how proud you feel of where you are and what you're doing and where you're going. This is a bit of regret. And I don't mind sharing in my own personal kind of life. I'm not someone who has ever had, how do I say this? Okay, if I had had a different personality or a different energy around my life's work, am I deluding myself when I say I could probably be known internationally as you know, a world-renowned authority on whatever it is, that this tool and these insights are something that in handled differently could have become the biggest, greatest, wildest thing to ever happen on the planet? Am I deluding myself?
No, I think that's real. I think that's
it's very much real, but not me. It's not me. And so you have to imagine that there are plenty of times when I kind of go like, I'm 64 years old. I coulda, shoulda, woulda, you know, that sort of that kind of thought process happens in this place downgrid, because honestly, I've got nothing to complain about. I've had a lovely life. We're quite comfortable. We're very happy. I got nothing to be complaining about. But when I think about where could it have gone, and I've oftentimes, it's where could it have gone in the hands of somebody else? Because I recognize that I'm me. And, you know, fame and fortune have never really been big motivators for me. I'm more interested in the work for the work's sake. And, you know, so that's,
But
I
you
think,
have
also,
that awareness. So without that awareness down there, downgrid, that would be the self-sabotage.
could very well be, you know, I understand that I am where I am and how I am because of choice. So I chose, I openly, intentionally, deliberately made the choices that I made. And so I'm okay with the whole thing. But I think, like, if someone just kind of accidentally ends up down here, they may very well have all kinds of rocks and regrets, and that cause great depression and ultimately perhaps a behavior set that's destructive.
Do you think that age plays a role in our spot on the ChangeGrid?
That's a good
I
question.
I would certainly believe, and if anyone else wants to chime in before I throw in my 2 cents, do feel free. What do you think the relationship is between age and movement or location on the change grid?
I think it has an impact. I don't know if I understand exactly how, because like for me, I'll be 52 next month, but it seems like, and I thought that I would get more patient as I get older, but it's the exact opposite.
Oh, no, we promise you, as someone who's 12 years older than you are, no, increased patience is not.
Yes, it's the exact opposite. I feel like but it's weird to me because
Exactly.
I've always been this kind of low-key person, not triggered by much, but it seems like
Mhm.
the older I'm getting, I have less tolerance for stupid stuff.
There you welcome to the club.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah, I think we could all kind of get there. So where does that come from? I would say to you that barring any organic event happening in someone's life, I believe that perceived ability is a one-way street. It
Mm.
continues to increase over time. I also believe that unless someone adds new challenges to their life or self-applies any of the upgrade maneuvers as far as increasing standards against current challenges, perceived challenge is going to go down. Natural movement on the change grid is downgrid. So because if nothing else changes, we're going to think things are getting easier and our ability is going to get greater. Sooner or later, we're going to end up very far downgrid. And so,
T,
yeah.
if there wasn't the understanding that you have, and someone was downgrid about that, would they be feeling guilt or shame?
Both. I think guilt is a variety of shame.
Okay.
Shame and guilt are kind of that. I think that more than anything, I think it's that they're going to look at themselves and be filled with regret. Know that that regret was something that they may have very well been able to do something about earlier on, but they've kind of like missed the boat, lost the opportunity. It's too late. Blah, 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 start to hold that belief system, which is all nonsense. But I mean, on the one hand, I'm 64, but on the other hand, I'm 64. So I got plenty of time left to do whatever I feel like doing. I think that's what's really going on here. There is a complacency, there is an ambivalence that comes along to play. And at a certain point, that person may examine their life and, who wrote about the shoulda, coulda, wouldas? That's the languaging that happens down here.
T, if I can add one more element to it. If you're downgrid and your partner is not downgrid or your surroundings are not downgrid, then I think you get pushed out into resentment.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Now, I can see the resentment would be from 2 different angles. So which angle are you thinking about for feeling that resentment?
Just that you're content being downgrid.
Yeah.
I mean, I think of my father-in-law who's 83 years old and enjoys a good nap.
Oh,
and if weeding and flower tending and cleaning and you name it aren't done, then there's hell to pay. And I think he's comfortable downgrid, but he gets pushed out, and I think that you end up in the where that would be on the edge right there.
Further out here. Yeah. Well, and I think that resentment thing is now a 2-way street, because this person who's perfectly content, who's involved with someone who is not as content, could resent the pressure that person was putting upon them. Meanwhile, that person could resent this other person for not stepping up and doing so. There's definitely a kind of a battle of where resentment is felt on both sides.
Yeah.
In that situation.
Interesting to figure out solutions for that.
Yeah, well, probably the big thing is, I can think about this is probably where a lot of partner problems come into play in businesses, or relationship problems come into play in marriages and other serious relationships. And you have to start by speaking one's truth,
Right.
owning the truth. And then you can decide whether or not these truths are compatible or not compatible. Are they workable or not workable? And do you want to even do whatever the work is? It's necessary. I love how people think that marriage counseling is the solution to everything. It's kind of like, no, there's going to be work to be done. Just saying. So you can go and talk about it all you want, but sooner or later you got to do the work. Got to do the work, and people have to be willing to do the work, etc. Otherwise, that resentment is
So it
going.
drives them more up and in.
Well, up and in, maybe one was going to withdraw more, maybe one's going to become more aggressive, and no doubt the divorce is going to say irreconcilable differences. So, yeah, so I think that that's kind of what that dynamic that's going on. But the point is that there is some shame that can actually exist quite far downgrid as well. Now, to finish it off, is there shame outgrid?
Only if you fail.
Oh, all right. If you fail, is shame going to be your initial reaction?
No,
No, I don't think so, because shame is because you're going to deny it if you're that far out grid.
right.
Yeah.
Just
You're going to be angry. You're going to blame somebody else.
Right. Now,
Yeah,
I
your
would,
blame shift.
yeah.
Blame
Now,
shift.
remember, we said that outgrid danger zone is where narcissism lives. And so everything you know about narcissistic personality disorder, et cetera, that's all going to come into play right here. And so I'm saying this as a curiosity, a question more than as a statement. But do you think that that person who has now failed immediately blames, because the shame that's actually underlying everything they are is just so much a part of who they are? They don't actually even have a fleeting moment where they go like, I failed, I messed up,
I think that's very real. I think what happens is that somebody who's that far out grid probably has such a deep sense of shame, they're terrified of it. And what that, if they're even aware of it, and
Right.
what happens is blaming is just such a natural attack to protect oneself from acknowledging that shame. Does that make sense?
Well,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that's interesting. That makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I often think about, why is anyone even willing to tackle a challenge of an 11 or a 12? I'm glad they think they have the ability to do it, but what are they trying to prove, and who are they trying to prove it to? So if they're trying to prove it to themselves, is it because they feel like they're somehow lacking or whatever? So I've always wondered if the truth be that shame is very much a part of the outgrid danger zone. In fact, I'll go as far to say, I think shame is part of every single inch of every one of those danger zones. It's all about shame. So, but yeah.
There's some psychologists that work with us when she's interviewing these high performing people that really encapsulate what Kathy just described. She said that they're in a state of situational blindness. So they lost that sense of pride and self and those kinds of things. But she said, if you turn the SB around, you get ES, and that's where blame shifting comes in. But they're never talking about oneself. They're going external and blaming everything and everyone around them.
Everything and everyone around them. That's very much an outgrid behavior. It is probably not so much an upgrid behavior, because to be upgrid, you have to acknowledge that you have a low level of ability. So that's probably not that. I think you're describing a very outgrid behavior. Very outgrid. Again, this is the domain of narcissism. And I think this is probably the most dangerous the 4 danger zones, if you will. I mean, face it, the person who's in the ingrid danger zone is just going to fade and disappear, and we're probably not even going to notice that it happened. The person in the upgrade danger zone is noisy. We know that they're stressed out, so they're going to get attention because noise gets attention. The people that are downgrid, this is a quiet killer. This is the quiet killer, but they're not all that involved in much beyond themselves and perhaps their immediate, social circle. But this person, this outgrid danger zone, profoundly dangerous. And so, yeah, narcissism.
They're not just dangerous to themselves, they're dangerous to others.
Exactly. So yeah, talk about they're not risk averse. They like risk. They like stirring things up, etc., because nothing is ever going to be their responsibility. And you see this in the way businesses operate very often, but this is a very dangerous human being.
I think this was the mortgage crisis of 2008.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is Enron. What was the dates for Enron? Even before that? Yeah. So this is whatever. There's always going to be a person or a group of people who believe that the rules do not apply to them. And if anything goes wrong, it's certainly not their fault.
Nope.
And so they're just plain dangerous. And
the people who made the derivatives for the mortgage-backed securities, they never would have made them if they didn't have all that subprime mortgage material to work with.
That's right. That's right. So there you go. All right, so we'll finish this discussion up next Tuesday. I just want to talk about shame shifting and pride shifting. So obviously, if the 4 danger zones are the domains of shame, expressed obviously in 4 different ways, but nevertheless expressed and experienced, well, the opposite would be the PowerPoint. But I think there's this whole range of other possibilities where there is enough pride to explore its value. So yeah, that's what I'd like to do in the next call. Okay, so any questions, comments before we're done?
No, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
That was very interesting. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.